I'd like to bring to order the Commission on Equity meeting of March 25th, 2024. I'd like to ask Commissioner Brown to read the land acknowledgement.
Okay. We, the City of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and Swatson Island Tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who are absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of the land, of this land, since time immemorial, and their role today is taking care of these lands perpetually. In perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allowed our nation, state, and city to develop as it has today. We recognize that community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854.
Now, I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, previous minutes, and the consent items.
I move approval of the agenda, the previous minutes, and the consent items.
I second.
More than 1 second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We approve this. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No opposition, therefore the minutes have been approved. Time for public comment. Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to share comment? Thank you. About online.
Commissioner, we do have one individual has raised their hand and we can bring them in to for public comment. And if there's anybody else who would like to speak as well, if you can raise your hand, we can bring you into public comment.
Oh. Okay, Bill, would you like to speak?
Yeah, my name is Bill Shaner, and I would just like to confirm before I start, this is non-agenda public comment. I don't want to speak on an agenda item. I have a different issue I'd like to bring forward.
Mr. Shaner, you can speak to any item.
I can speak to any item? Perfect. I have recently noticed an increase of unhoused people in and around the area. Now, it's not as bad here in Lacey as it is in some other areas of Washington, but I think there is a lot more we could be doing and focusing on helping out our unhoused population. For example, one of the easiest ways that we can deal with the housing crisis and the lack of housing that is available is that we can maybe get someone in here to enforce federal immigration law and deport all of these illegal immigrants that are taking up housing that could be used to house legal American citizens that deserve housing. We should probably try and take care of our own people before we go and worry about a bunch of beaners, hopping over the border. Thank you.
Mr. Shaner? Anyone else?
Sure, you have one more individual who raised their hand.
Chad Bastwell. Go ahead and speak.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I joined the meeting a little bit late. Is this the non-agenda portion of the public comment?
Yes, you may speak.
Okay, great. There's so many things to talk about, but our country is being deliberately destroyed. And so I'd like to start with the diversity, equity, and inclusion agendas that are being pushed on all the cities through actually an agenda that's coming from a very well-funded centralized source. Diversity means fewer white people. Inclusion means exclusion of white people. Equity means stealing from white people. You can go to, you can see the movie Defiant by Devon Stack. You can go to gtvflyers.com, gtvflyers.com. I recommend watching the incredible movie. It's a documentary called Europa: The Last Battle. It's very long. You can watch it in segments. So the next time you decide to binge watch anything, I recommend you watch Europa: The Last Battle. We're all being played. We're all being played by the nefarious Jew that has made our society ugly. Our art is horrific. Porn is free. God is a joke. Our food is poison. Dads have become optional. Politicians are rich. Our money has become worthless. Buildings are oppressive. Men and women compete. Children hate their ancestors. It's a horrific, horrific nightmare that we live in. And I urge you all to wake up to what's happening. You know, the slave trade was entirely, every single aspect of the slave trade was Jewish. All the slave ships were owned by Jews, and all of the auction houses were owned by Jews. So if anybody here wants reparations, you go and ask the hook-nosed rat-like creature for the
Okay,
reparation.
thank you. We have other people that would like to speak, so let's move on. Thank you. I won't listen to it.
Sure, you've got two more individuals.
One, Gabe Stepman. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Gabe Stepman. You can find me on Twitter at JNewsGabe. I just have a quick question for the commission is why don't we just stop the hate and separate? We have all these commissions on equity, how to divide up resources and stop racism and bigotry and all that. Why don't we just separate? And why don't we ever see Africans going back to their ethno-states in Africa? It just doesn't make sense to me. If everyone always complains about racism, why would you want to stay in a place that supposedly hates you and oppresses you? It's just a strange phenomenon. It seems to be a policy of remain and complain instead of, actually wanting to, like I said, end the hate and separate. I just want to also echo that last caller. Europa: The Last Battle, which is available at europathelastbattle.net, is a excellent documentary series about how the Jews control all of our institutions, our government. They're behind communism, race mixing, the slave trade, basically every negative aspect of our society is funded and pushed by this tribe, this small nepotistic racial tribe of Jews. So I just wanted to pose that. Maybe that's some food for thought. End the hate and separate. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Jeremy Schwartz.
Hey, hello, City Council. How y'all doing tonight?
Great.
I would just like to say, to start off, I want to say Black Lives Matter, okay? And I went on this website called gtvflies.com. Are you familiar with the website? No? Well, on this website, what I learned is that I've been blaming them white people for the slavery, but I actually learned that it was actually the Jews that brought us over here on the slave ships, and that actually 4 out of the 5 slave owners, they was all Jewish. All right. Now, I'm curious why the Black community is blaming the white people for the evils that the Jews have done. And I cannot simply stand here and allow it to continue. Now, I would like to propose a final solution, okay? And this is that we need to get the camps back, okay? And if we want the evils to stop, we need to actually create a solution. And now we're living in a Weimar Germany right now, and a Weimar Germany requires Weimar solutions. All right. And if we are not prepared to go through some hardship, we will never have any peace until the pest is exterminated.
Okay.
All right. I just want to say Black.
Thank you. We have some others, that seems to be all the, very similar message. If you would still like to speak, go ahead, keep your hand up, but if it's, basically the same, we also have, you may also email us. There are other ways to communicate, but if you still have your hands up. Ursula Haverbeck?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Phenomenal. My goodness, some of them comments. I find it interesting that we're hearing about Weimar Germany. What I find most interesting about that is that there was a lot of things going on then that I think are honestly happening now. I don't know how aware you are of your history, but you know, when I was growing up, I was always told that Hitler was the bad guy. And as I get older and do more research, I find out that the books he burned were awful, disgusting works. One author in particular that he burned all of his stuff and removed his license to practice medicine was Mr. Wilhelm Reich, who, you know, his entire study was on orgasms and he studied children. As disgusting as that is what he was fighting. He was fighting transgender clinics. He was fighting child prostitution. And we live in a time period where this is happening now.
I think I'm gonna ask people to do an email to us so that we can move on to the rest of our.
I'm sorry, are you pro child prostitution?
This isn't a.
Hitler was right.
Here, we were just
And
having
you are
public comment, and would like to have the people that with their hands raised that to send an email to the Commission on Equity, and that's how we will be able to hear your views.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
I propose that we send the niggers back to Africa and deport all of the Jews and send them back to concentration camps. And we need to do that immediately. Hail Hitler, nigger, nigger, white power.
Okay, I really am not gonna allow this.
nigger, nigger, white power.
We're going to have the muted, those comments.
When's we get rid of them Jews? I'm tired of them Jews. When's we going to gas them?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you for discontinuing that conversation. It's appalling to me that we have to be subjected to that.
What's appalling is the Jews have hijacked our society.
Wow. Yes,
That kind of racism, anti-Semitism, and all of that is not what we're about. I'm proud to be part of this equity commission. We're working to make this community
Very much so.
an inclusive community, and we're celebrating the diversity.
Yes.
So they have a right to call in, but we have a right to cut off the language being used. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Yes. Let's go on, can we? let's have something inspirational.
What I decided to talk about was not very inspirational,
Mhm.
since a lot of what I decided to speak on was women's history and how some of the things that we are being subjected to in today's economy is being rolled back, or in today's history is being rolled back. So I decided to read a poem called What Women Wanted. And it does not say who it was by, and it's meant to be a poem for children. Long before your grandma was young, women's freedom was a song not yet sung. Men mostly said what women didn't get. Men mostly said that women didn't get it. If you gave them a job, they just forget it. They said a woman's job was cleaning house and staying quiet as a mouse. But many women said we wanted more. We like our homes, but we wanted more than chores. We wanted the right to earn real pay. We worked just as hard as men each day. And more than anything, please note, we wanted to have the right to vote. And after the marches and protests were done, all that is just what they, let's see, it says all of that is just what they want.
Thank you. Do we have a volunteer for next month's inspirational?
Sure.
Thank you. Right, moving into business items.
Before we move to business, let me just comment, that was a very nice poem, and my head was on the previous
Mine
conversation.
was too.
And I'm sorry, I couldn't really concentrate on what you were saying, but thank you for that. This is Women's History Month, and it warranted our attention to this matter, so I apologize for the ignoramuses that got in my head. for the
Yeah.
moment. Thank you.
It got into mine too, and
Thank
I
you very much.
really wanted to lash back. But yeah, I do want to say a little bit about what
No need to.
went on there. I mean, that was just appalling, and literally diversity, inclusion, and equity does not include hatred and rage and all of the stuff that went on just a few minutes ago. I find it appalling, and I also find that if we don't start being a little bit nicer to each other and a little bit more considerate of others, then this whole, we're gonna lose our country, the country that wasn't ours to begin with, because we were the original immigrants that took over a land that was not ours. And so when we are told to go back to where we come from, we need to also remember the reason why a lot of us are here is because some of us didn't have a choice, and some of us pretty much were escaping the cruelties of home, AKA the Boston Tea Party. So consider that when you're thinking about the country that you so rightly think that you deserve is yours. It is stolen. And you need to also keep the history into consideration while you're looking at some of the things that you are looking at. That's where I want to go with
Thank
that.
you.
Or well said.
Well said.
Yeah. Well said.
Okay.
Chair, you do have a hand that's raised, and it's from our youth commissioner.
Pardon? Oh, hand up. Samuel. Would
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Samuel.
This only happened the one time I was away. That was kind of weird.
Only time it's ever happened, Sam.
Also, like about the trade thing, we actually attempted to move people back and try to do that, but you might have heard of this country. It's called Liberia. We failed to do it because too many people, but don't you know I'm kind of a history dude. I don't have much to say, but that dude was like totally historically wrong. Liberia was a failed project, and like, anyway, I'm out.
Yeah. Thank you, Samuel. It's, I think, really affected all of us. Thank you.
Sure, a couple of things I might propose to this group for our next meeting is to, number one, turn on the pre-registration for public comment moving forward. It's similar to what we've done with the city council as well, which would allow individuals to have to register prior to public comment. And then also just to make mention to, as the chair, we can always close public comment.
What was the last part?
We can always close public comment.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, clearly that was
Yeah,
organized today, but from my vantage point, it didn't work. Ignorance doesn't work. And the comments they made, or I've heard them before, they're all senseless. They say, go back to where you came from. I came from Mississippi, and I go back there and visit, of course. But those things, I grew up in the South and had to deal with and grew up in the 60s and 70s and had to face a lot of this and experienced it firsthand. So what they're doing is clearly organized, but it's just misses the mark, is ignorant and not effective. So.
I appreciate this group and that we can support each other and support the people that we represent and
not to mention,
the-
there is
the-
a youth on the council
strength
that
is
now
here.
had to be subjected to something that group decided to do, especially when they start talking about children. There was a youth on this meeting, just to let the record be shown.
We'll keep strong.
Yes.
But the only other comment I would make is that the work of this commission is more important than ever. To know we in this community are in the midst of that kind of hatred, racism and anti-Semitism. It's spooky, it's scary, and it's always been here, but it's getting bold and surfacing. And so our work is more important than ever.
Yes, it is.
And I would guess that none of those people are from this community.
I would
Zero.
guess that too.
It's organized probably nationally or whatever. None of them are, from this community.
I wouldn't go that far. I'm encountering some folk these days that are right here in this community, not to that extreme.
Yeah.
And that bold, but let us not think that that's somewhere else, somebody else.
Yeah, that's why we're.
Diversity is just that, diversity. It brings all kinds,
together,
not just the kind we welcome and want, okay?
Yes. Thank you.
A couple of, I guess, other items to the commission that we could consider to moving forward, in addition to the registrations, if this group wants to have a conversation on it, is number one, we could only accept written comments moving forward. Number two, we could also, moving forward, limit comments to items on the agenda, which is
Oh, I see. That's why
slightly
they asked
different.
that question.
And then, like I mentioned, with the registration, taking steps to verify that we know that the speaker is here for a particular purpose for a meeting.
Yeah, well, I don't favor totally shutting it down.
No.
That's kind of stuff, keeps us on top of things. It helps us to know and hear what's going on. And to me, I think it just invigorates us to, it motivates us to do more and keep doing what we're doing and to be more intentional in what we're doing, not, run totally from it. Have some limitations on it, but not totally try to shut it all down because, we need to know and hear some of the stuff. So we know that what we're doing is right. It encourages us to continue to push forward and not, fall subject to that kind of carrying on. Yeah. Freedom of speech, I believe in, but there are limits and restrictions. There are some limits on freedom of speech.
And if there is some kind of registration process the city is looking at, or we could incorporate, to have them, identified by name, address, so we can establish whether or not they from around here or some national organized effort, at least from that, that'll help some, but the freedom of speech is important. We want to be open and hear what people have to say, and it's not necessarily always on the agenda as to what's on their mind that they want to comment to us about, so.
Yeah, that's how
Find
we
some
learn about
medium
them.
between some controls, but not shut down legitimate citizen comments that, we would like to hear. And I don't know what that balance is, but,
Yeah.
as we search for something, let's keep that in mind.
So commissioners, we can always add the registration. There are limitations to what we can ask members of the public to provide, but we can certainly have them sign up in advance for a public speak. We'd always have our written public comment also available for community members to use. And then I think another thing you can do too is you can set a time for public comment as far as like you have a minute to address this body.
Yeah, I was kind of looking to see if there was anything.
So commissioners, for the next meeting, would you like me to set up the registration, the pre-registration?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
1 minute.
45 seconds. Make it like a pitch, any other pitch, you get maybe 30 seconds.
Okay, let's take a breath and
Yes.
go to climate and sustainability efforts. Don't think we've met.
I know, I was just going to say, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Lindsay Fields. I use they, she pronouns. I'm the climate sustainability coordinator here at the City of Lacey. I've been with the city. Oh, sorry, forgot to share screen. Thank you, Shannon. I've been with the city for about 5 years. I've been in this current role since last May. And so actually 5 years in April will mark the 5th year that I've been here. And so, yeah, actually thank you, Shannon, for inviting me to speak. It's a really good time to come and talk to the Equity Commission. We have a lot of new projects going. We're in the beginning phases of 2 new climate initiatives with the larger collaborative. And so throughout this process, I hope to bring back these initiatives to get the Commission on Equity's perspective, incorporate those into what we're doing, as well as our Planning Commission, and then just the general public as well. And so just really quick, I always like to start out with our goals. So the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan is really a hard driver for the type of work that we do within Lacey and then really just within Thurston County. The process started in 2018, although before that, we definitely had sustainability plans in place at Lacey. I think it's something like R3 plan or something like that. And it kind of folded into the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan as well as some other sustainability plans. 2018, we started that process. We adopted in 2021. And then since then, we've been restructuring to better implement climate plans. And then as of last year was really our full first, technically, if we want to get technical, really this year is our first full year of implementation of the plan. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. But the goals for the climate, it's a greenhouse gas reductions climate mitigation plan. So our goals are around greenhouse gas emissions. By 2030, we hope to be at 45% below 2015 levels. And then by 2050, we'll be at 85% below 2015 levels. And so those are our pretty lofty goals for the future. We got like 7 years to really hammer hard on the first goal, and then we've got some time, but really starting those building blocks now for the 2050 goals. And this is just some data from, sorry, it's hard to see. So the takeaway from this is buildings, energy, and transportation are our 2 major categories of greenhouse gas reductions. So the built environment and then just transportation. And this is from our last work or our last update. We'll have a new one, an annual report this summer. And this is just kind of where we are in terms of where we need to be to meet our goals. So we're not on target, but we have reduced, and a lot of this is from 2020 and 2021, which was the pandemic, so kind of have to grade on a curve a little bit. Yeah. And so the big thing that happened last year is we restructured the climate mitigation plan as we were labeled, and we're now the Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative, and that includes the jurisdictions of Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, and Thurston County. And so this collaborative, also called the TCMC, but I won't throw a lot of acronyms at you, the collaborative, which is a fun little title, is 4 parts. So there's the jurisdictions who are implementing the climate programs. There's the staff team, and each of the jurisdictions now has at least one dedicated person to the collaborative. The CAW, which stands for the Climate Advisory Work Group, which is made up of individuals from the community, 15 of them who provide perspective on the work we're doing. And then the executive committee, which really champions the idea to their councils. So they're made up of one council from each jurisdiction, or I guess Thurston County is a commission instead of a council. And so they really champion the ideas back to council and help me do my job of getting these things through council and passed, and getting budget appropriated as needed if required. And so this is the new collaborative structure that we're currently operating on, and it's going well. We've worked out a lot of the kinks. We're really getting smooth into how this is going to work. We're feeling really good about it. And so this kind of brings us to some updates I'd like to share with you. In the first, let me step back really fast for the collaborative. We have this thing called an annual retreat every year. The public can come and observe. Please feel free to come. It'll be at Olympia on April 15th, starting at 4 to 8. We don't get public comment then, but you can give public comment at the executive committee if you ever feel like that's something you'd like to do. But you can definitely come and observe and see the kind of work we do. So at the regional retreat, the staff team, the EC, the executive committee, and the climate advisory work group all come together, and we build consensus on one regional initiative that we'd like to collaborate on for the next year. So last year was our first regional retreat, and we had it here at Lacey about a month after I started, which was really fun to get together. We came to consensus. The staff team kind of allowed 3 through. 2 of them were Thurston County's forestry advocacy stuff, advocating for state land, more forestry protections on state land in Thurston County. And the other 2 are 2 pretty big ones. So it's the home energy score model ordinance and the energy efficiency and electrification campaign, the E3, as we're calling it, because it's a lot less of a mouthful. And so those are the 2 that we're planning this year for implementation in 2025. So we got the ILA signed. I'd like to shout out our city manager, Rick, for signing that really fast for me. I appreciate it. And now we have the ILA in place so that we can pull funds to do this planning work, which is really what that was getting in board. And so a couple of things that we're doing at the city before we get to that. SoulSmart, so by the end of April, will be designated. SoulSmart is just a designation. It's free for municipalities. We go through this process with a technical advisor at SoulSmart. It's funded through the federal government, and I forget which department exactly it comes from. And we go through this process. They audit our codes, our processes, our information that we have, and they come back with some recommendations for us to change. And then once we get those on board, you can get a bronze, silver, or gold designation, just all around solar, how easy it is to get solar permitted in Lacey for your rooftop, or even for like standalone solar. And so we're sitting pretty good. None of our code prohibits solar. We do need to make some minor code changes at the middle of the year, but we're gonna go ahead and go forward with the designation now, and then we can come back. So we're shooting for like the mid-range designation right now. And that'll be done by the end of April. And it's actually it's a specific action called out in the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. And so, yeah, we're excited. We'll get that designation hopefully soon. Been working hard on getting some updates for us. And then, so again, we're one part of the Thurston Climate Mitigation Collaborative. And this year, and as well as the Tumwater person, are the co-project leads on the home energy score model ordinance. So Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston, the collaborative, we are working and planning this year to get a home energy score model ordinance passed and through councils, and we haven't figured out the language of mandated versus not mandated yet. And a home energy score is basically when you sell your home, you can do an inspection. Or if you even just want to do updates on your home, you can have someone come in, an energy audit person. They can audit your home and tell you if you need to update your windows, your insulation. They can tell you exactly where your heat's going out if you have problematic areas in your house. They can give you advice on updating your heating type, so like updating to heat pump, electrifying, so getting away from propane or gas. And then they can also connect you with resources to like rebates and stuff like that to get the work done. And then you get a home energy score. And you can use this when you list your home, and home buyers can actually use this too to determine the cost of owning that home. So it's a cross sort of, it's really great for energy efficiency. It's also really great for first-time home buyers or even just people who are struggling to figure out which kind of house they should buy. You don't often factor in the utilities, the cost of upgrades and stuff like that. An energy score would definitely help you out in getting that. And right now in the Portland area, they're costing about $150 each, 125 to 150, and that hasn't changed over the last 5 years very much. So it's not a super big barrier, but we're definitely looking into, yeah.
We have one question,
Yeah.
from Kim. Would you like?
Feel free.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Great presentation. So far what you said about the Source Smart, I mean, that truly makes sense. I was just wondering, solar panel, installing solar panels at the individuals' homes, is that something that, is it part of this plan, or do you kind of promote or encourage something like that?
Yeah, so installing solar, like residential solar, is definitely part of the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. So just encouraging different uses of energy and encouraging solar. And so I think it'd be under the strategy building and energy codes, the yellow one in the plan. We have a couple of strategies to address solar usage in Thurston County.
Because, there are a lot of homes there are salesmen stopping by at your home all the time, pushing that, installing solar panels. And I just don't find that to be most effective.
No,
Costs a
yeah.
lot of money, and it doesn't produce much. And yeah, I just didn't know if if Lacey is actually pushing that or promoting that. I'll be kind of like puzzled about that. So just wanted to share.
Yeah, solar is an interesting way to produce your own energy in Washington State. Unfortunately, our trends in climate change have made it easier to produce solar year round. And so it's definitely one part of the plan. PSC has a mandate by Washington State to electrify their grid and completely do away with coal by 2035, I think, something like that, or 2030, and they're on track to do that. So helping people install solar is one part of electrifying our grid. The other part is just making energy efficiency inside the home, making the home more energy efficient, the other part of the plan. Yeah, and so the other part of the home energy score model ordinance is the program and the campaign we have going with it. So we're looking at modeling something like Energize Olympia to the broader Thurston County, which is a group heat pump purchase. So you can get a heat pump purchase at a much lower cost because we've contracted with someone to provide that cost to the people who are working on our program. We're looking at other things as well, providing more rebates. So potentially still doing our rebate program as well as our matching rebate program, as well as something like that. And so we're not just gonna mandate that folks do home energy scores and then not have some sort of funding available for them to help get home energy scores, as well as helping them get those improvements. So I've applied for some HERE funding through Department of Commerce. We're waiting to hear back, which is funded through the Climate Commitment Act. And they're trying to push those funds out faster in the hopes that it doesn't get repealed this November. And so hopefully we'll hear back soon, which will really help us get a lot of funding to do these programs, to do the campaign in the home energy scores. We're also looking at contracting those services out. There's a few consultants that manage those programs. So we wouldn't necessarily have to do that in-house. If we did mandate it, we could do it through a third-party contractor. But those are all things we're trying to flush out. We're gonna have 7 to 10 stakeholder groups of different like builders, realtors, low-income housing providers, over the course of from May to September. And that's really gonna give us, we're gonna give them kind of a cold document to look at, like what we'd like to, like modeling after past ones, and they're gonna provide us lots of feedback. And so hopefully I'll be able to bring that back to the Equity Commission or Commission on Equity as well, and the Planning Commission, and get your thoughts when we have that. Transportation and land use. And one thing I didn't talk about, I might have a slide down. Actually, I have a slide down. I'll keep going. Just a couple of things. All of these are complete except for the comprehensive plan update that's happening this year. We are starting electrifying our fleet. We purchased more than that now. We have 16 new EVs that we purchased. And we got, I think, 3 Lightnings for our shop so far. We may have more since the last time I checked. And we have new EV charging stations at the shop as well to charge those. And we're still working on getting the new EV chargers around the city. I think there are some hiccups with contracting, but those should be done this year as well. So we'll have up to, I think, 12 new charging stations, and maybe 5 of those are gonna be fast chargers, so a little bit faster than your normal EV charger. Water and waste sector, these projects were completed or are in the process of getting completed. And so these just help us have more efficient water system, which means we're using less energy to pump water around the city. That includes maintaining our odd even watering schedule. Really helps reduce cost for not just to keep our water a little bit cheaper for the user, but also requires less energy to pump with our mandatory watering schedule. And so this is we don't have any agricultural land designated in Lacey, but this is a lot of, we do have green space in Lacey, and actually our new comp plan will actually ask us to designate more green space, I think, with our new update. So there's the Woodland Creek Community Park Riparian Restoration Project, which I think is on hold, but that is restoring the Woodland Creek. So taking out a lot of the invasive species that are found there and installing native plants. We have a comprehensive forest and tree canopy program. This year, we're supposed to do our new canopy analysis to see if we kept our goal of no net loss of 28%. I haven't started that yet, and it'll probably be closer to the end of the year when we do that. We have a lot going on. Greg Cuyo Park will hit its phase 1 this year after some hiccups last year, and we're all really excited about that. And then last year, Parks completed their comprehensive plan update, which had some new climate elements in it as well. And then last year we put in a oil and water separator at Woodland Creek just to help with stormwater management there. Something we're really excited about, and these numbers just got updated today because I got the new batch reports. So we've spent about $80,000 right now in direct payments to residents to electrify or to get efficiency upgrades through our matching rebate program. And that's just in Lacey funds. So total with the rebate they're getting from PSC and then the matching rebate from us, it's about $160,000 of energy efficiency upgrades in homes, and that's about 224 rebates. And so I know, and this is just till end of January. So I haven't even got the batch reports for February and March. And we're anticipating that this next batch report will be the most because we had a lot of electrification rebates. And those are about $4,000 each. And so that's really like getting rid of propane, putting in electric heat, usually like heat pumps. And so super excited about that. The program, I haven't hit maybe 1 or 2 hiccups with just people not reading information all the way and thinking like being in the UGA and not in city limits. For the most part, we haven't had any issues, and really creating a low barrier program where they don't have to reapply at Lacey. They just get it through PSC. And even us like having PSC send the checks and us rebating PSC has really streamlined the program. Yeah, Yes.
In doing these things, is there a household income requirement, like has to be below poverty or at level 25% or whatever?
Yeah, so PSC actually has efficiency boost, which is an income qualified rebate. And so you can still get the same rebates, but you can get more money back if you're efficiency boost qualified. And I'm not sure what the like the LMI requirements are for that. But I do know, so what we're doing, so for the electrification campaign, which is like the most amount of money someone can get back, the standard rebates, we're only rebating at half. So they get 3,000 plus 1,500 from us. That way we can spend a lot of the money on the $4,000 rebates, which are manufactured homes and efficiency boost. So we're really getting a lot of money to the folks who really need it to make these upgrades. And really hoping to encourage lower income households to make those energy efficiency upgrades. So that's really exciting. And yeah, so I'll update you more again when I come back on how much we've spent so far. And the great thing about this is these are all direct payments to residents. And so this isn't, we're not paying PSC for contracting, any of that. So this is just like direct money to our residents, which is really awesome as well. Yeah, and so residential energy use is currently the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in our region. It's just the built environment. So hopefully with some of the HERE money, we might be able to also start working with small businesses. So expanding our program just a little bit to reach out to businesses and get their buildings energy efficient as well and get those upgrades.
Before we leave
Yeah.
that slide, the residential, the last one you just commented
Yes,
on.
yes.
That's very interesting to me.
Mhm.
And residential energy use is the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah,
That's over automobiles.
for our region, in our region, the built environment is the largest and greenhouse gas emitter. It's very close with transportation, but specifically for Thurston County, it might be different in like South King County or North King County because they're definitely commuting a lot more than we are. And there's just more cars on the road. But for our region, it's residential, I probably should have said residential and commercial. So just the built environment, our buildings. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
That qualifies.
That's probably a hiccup on my part. My bad.
Statement then. Yeah.
And then, so this year kicks off a massive plan update. So it's our 10-year update per the Growth Management Act. Everything has to get updated, but what's different this year is that the Department of Commerce, by way of the state legislature, said that we have to include 2 new climate elements in our comp plan. So a climate sub-element on greenhouse gas emissions reductions, which we already have with the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. So we don't really have to do a lot of work on that sub-element. But we also have to do a climate resiliency sub-element, which really creates goals and moving forward for our city to think about climate resiliency, especially in areas that are higher on the like environmental justice spectrum. For us, that really includes like residential areas along like Martin Way, I-5. So it's like more air particles than flooding and then also heat waves. So like having to plan for more heat and higher levels of heat. And so we'll be conducting a vulnerability and risk assessment specifically for climate hazards this year, which will kind of inform the direction we're gonna go with our climate resiliency sub-element. On top of that, we now have to go through our entire comp plan through a climate lens. And so we're gonna have to look at vehicle miles traveled, multimodal transportation resources, public transportation, and then even in the land use planning side in parks, like designating more green space. And so it's gonna be a massive effort. Fortunately, I think we got an extension to the end of next year to get the whole comp plan adopted by council. But this year, Commerce is really out. So we're this year, but other communities are like 2 or 3 years ahead. They'll have to do this as well. But every new comp plan update now has to include this climate element. The good thing is Commerce gave us money. So we have a grant through Commerce for total $700,000. This portion of the comp plan, we're gonna use $350,000. And then we can come back and do maybe a building decarbonization plan for the shop, or use that other $350,000 on another planning effort later on. We could also potentially use it to do the plan update in 2028 for the thirst and climate mitigation plan. That's when the major update is due. And so they're not requiring a bunch of stuff of us while also not recognizing the need for local jurisdictions to have some sort of extra funding to get this effort through. So that'll be great.
In that vulnerability study, I saw one community that had a like satellite view of green spaces and where the green was and where it wasn't. And then what that community was getting overheated and needed more air conditioning or whatnot, and who lived in those not green areas. So we would love if that's, well, we would love to see this.
I hope to get a lot of really great visual mapping of Lacey done at that point. And also that would be a great time to do tree canopy analysis again, I think, and really see which neighborhoods have sufficient coverage for heat in terms of tree canopy analysis, and where are we really missing those. And also looking into high heat instances. So unfortunately, we're projecting to have higher and higher, hotter and hotter summers and longer, drier summers. So there's also, smoke inhalation and from wildfires and all of that we have to think about. And then, heat, places for people to cool down, how that affects our energy grid. People are using AC more and more. So can we even power that, and talking with PSC about what their capabilities are. So. Yeah, it's the next 7 years are gonna be pretty crazy for climate. I always tell people it was like, for the longest time, it was just like, oh, we'll get to it, or does that really exist? And then it's like all of a sudden there's like millions of dollars and they want us to do all this stuff. And it's nice because now we're not just convincing people that we need the funds to do it, and that it's good that we do it. But now we just have to catch up. And 7 years is not a lot of time in planning to get stuff done, but I think we're up for the task to do it. And that's it. Questions, comments? I'll leave that up. Yes.
Given what you're explaining to us, coupled with some recent information I read about Thurston County being the fastest growing on the I-5 corridor for the past 10 years and projected to also be the same for the next 10 years.
Yep.
Issues such as outreach and communications, when we're talking about inclusion and equity, and we're talking about funds and rebates and all this. What are the plans and what are the discussions about what must be done differently with this mass of people that we now are trying to communicate these things to, so that more people are informed and can take advantage of these opportunities? Yeah. I'm really concerned about the outreach and communication because it has to be different.
Right.
If we want to get to different people who don't ordinarily
100%.
read and hear.
Which
includes, we don't have a local newspaper anymore for the most part. Not everybody read the utility newsletter insert. How are we going to communicate and outreach to the people who need to benefit from these?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question and something I grapple with a lot. So many people get their information and stuff through social media. So many people don't. And so the trend is the last 5 years, I would say, is really to push information out on social media, but social media isn't the catch-all, right? It can be very limited to what people, their algorithm, what they actually look through. It can, really, we can also expand, but one great thing about working with PSC too is also when we're thinking about communities, and communities within our community whose first or maybe written language isn't English, is that almost all of their information has been translated into multiple languages. And so we're not only getting to use their contact base, which is much larger than us because they can push emails out through customers. And I don't know very many people who aren't on PSC's customer list, which is really great. And so we're able to leverage their resources, as well as review information before it gets sent out. So we have that contract in place where we can leverage their resources while also ensuring that keeps with the message of Lacey. And so that's great. The other thing, actually, we just had a staff meeting today, which is kind of funny, is that maybe we should get like a heat pump outfit and then go to all of the community outreach events. And so people can actually see what a heat pump is, and they can, you know, get attuned to what it looks like and ask questions. My background is in education and outreach, specifically for stormwater and environmental education. So I'm very passionate about it. There are so many people who come to Children's Day at Lacey, all of the events that we have that are free for the public to come to. And so providing information there, but also providing information in different languages is super key, and also hoping in the future to potentially have translation services of some sort, because that's like the biggest barrier right now. And we also have the Climate Advisory Work Group, which is made up of people from Thurston County. And I was really, this year we made a massive effort to include multiple perspectives from our community. And often when you hear that, you think, oh, there's like 2 or 3. I think we have around 40 to 50% diversity on our Climate Advisory Work Group, and actually most of the applications came from folks you wouldn't normally think of when you think of public, public engagement in Western Washington. The folks we've typically excluded from those resources. So it expands ages, expands races, expands income level, which was really great to have folks, and we provide stipends. So we kind of create that barrier. We lessen that barrier for them to attend meetings. Low income folks, they can get paid while they're there, which is, we found, has been an excellent way to go about it. But there's always more work to do in terms of education outreach, being in communities. My colleague, Jennifer, who's our housing coordinator, she just did a survey where she went out to manufactured homes and got an amazing turnover rate for surveys and just talking with people. So modeling, going door to door, which you don't often think of these days in a large city, but it's still very, very good. And like you said, I think Lacey even is the fastest growing jurisdiction of the county, in one of the fastest growing counties. And so what's going to be key for our comp plan update is getting accurate and timely population growth out into 2045, 2050, because it'll really help us allocate resources that we need for our community. But yeah, I'm passionate about education outreach, and I'm always looking for diversified ways to get the message out there, whatever it be. And HOAs have community groups that I go and talk to. I've been to Jubilee a few times to talk to those folks. Yeah, I just try and stay out in the community as much as possible.
So Commissioner, we're also going to be listening a little bit later to Sadie, who's going to be talking about the community liaison program, which could be another possibility as well for continued engagement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I had a couple things. We had a presentation from the middle housing person, and like that, when you're planning in that direction, then the climate stuff should just be
Absolutely
all the way.
Yeah.
Solar in the middle of your little
dense
cottages or whatever. Yeah. Then what about renters?
Mhm.
How do we focus on renters?
Yeah, we're hoping as well, once we hear back from Commerce about HERE funding, that we'll be able to expand. So I'll say this right now. So PSC, through our program, renters can qualify for the rebate if they're installing energy efficiency upgrades and rentals. So it includes renters. The challenge we're gonna have to get through with the rest of the TCMC is how we include renters into our new campaign, our E3 campaign. And so having one of our focus groups be comprised of renters, and even, I don't know, landlords, people who own the spaces. And so how we can fit their needs into this campaign. Because we don't just want folks who own homes to be able to access these funds. We want to have enough funding that everyone can have a clean, efficient, lower cost energy bill. Because oftentimes when you're renting, you're paying that energy bill. So it directly benefits you to have energy efficiency upgrades in the place you're renting. Yeah. Sorry.
All right, great, thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, feel free to contact me at any time if you have questions. Or if you just want to come in and talk more about any of our climate sustainability programs, or even if you have more ideas on education outreach or anything, I'd love to hear it. Yeah. It's gonna take all of us to get to our goals, so, yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Next, Human Services Grant Program.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for having us here tonight. My name is Michelle Chavez, and I am new to the City of Lacey as of last October 2023. I work for the City Manager's Office. I am the Human Services Coordinator, and I report to Shannon. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our new Human Services Grant Program that we have at the city going forward. So the city council has allocated $300,000 in the 2024 budget for a competitive human services grant program. And the reason that we wanted to do this way is because we wanted to create more equity and efficiency in how we present our grant dollars, so that it was transparent to the community about how to apply for human services grant funds. And they had a predictable, timely program, and they could understand what to expect with regards to the community. So my presentation is in 4 parts. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background of where we're at. So we have presented to City Council 2 times. We presented first at the work session on March 12th, and I did basically the same presentation for the council. And they moved it forward with some recommendations to have a joint session with the Human Services Work Group. And then we did meet again with the council on March 19th, and we received approval to move ahead with standing up a human services work group for 2024. And so in your packet, I think you had actually the resolution 1145. That is the resolution that allows us to go forward with the grant program and to recruit people for this new human services work group. So I'm going to quickly talk about what I've been working on in terms of developing the program, the research and development that I did to make the recommendations to the city council, what a needs assessment overview would look like. So going out to the community and getting feedback about what are the priority needs. And then our work group, which we've gotten approval now from the city council to set that up. And I think you also in your packet have an attachment, which is the application for the work group. And I'm happy to say that's actually live online today. We're going to be doing a press conference, it's not that big, press release today to get the word out to the community. And we want all of your help in getting folks interested in serving on this advisory group, because as you heard, we want as much diversity as possible in our people who are helping advise the city on how we're going to move forward with our programs. So basically the research and development is the first piece. And I talked to I looked at about 15 different communities in Washington and some other states, and all the different states that had programs with human services grant programs that were standalone. And we decided to interview 5 that kind of mirrored Lacey and a little bit of similar population base and different challenges. So the cities that I talked to were Marysville, Lakewood, Bellevue, Issaquah, Washington, and then Hillsboro, Oregon. So of the 5 communities that I talked to, a lot of them had similarities. All of them had a standalone human services grant program that was out of their general fund. All of them had some type of advisory board or work group who took a look at the applications from the organizations and then made a recommendation to the city council on funding, on how to fund these different grant programs, grant applications, excuse me. And then again, it was all of them had a competitive application. So this is just a quick chart of the 5 different communities that I talked to, where they had commonalities and where things were different. And again, I just wanted to point out, all of them had some type of advisory board. And that's why we made the recommendation to City of Lacey that we stand up an ad hoc advisory board. So we don't know if it's going to be a permanent commission such as this, but we wanted to get that conversation going as soon as we could. In addition to the commonalities, there were some things that were different with these different programs. Some of them had, most of them had done a needs assessment. One city modeled their priorities off of other cities that were nearby that had kind of similar issues. 60% allowed only social services to be funded, so not brick and mortar. That means brick and mortar means anything like a capital project or purchasing equipment or vehicles, etc. And then we had 40%, which allowed for small capital purchases, because a lot of times, a lot of these communities also have federal grant programs like the Community Development Block Grant Program, and those programs do not allow for equipment purchases or new buildings, or if you need to purchase a van for the food banks, et cetera, you wouldn't be able to purchase that. So when I looked at these communities, they're allowing that flexibility to catch maybe some of the gaps where the federal dollars were more restrictive. Most of them had minimum grant awards. One did not allow for partial funding, because sometimes that can get confusing for the readers. I don't know if you've all been involved with reading applications for grants, but it can be kind of confusing when you have all these different variables. And then 40% had a maximum award. So that was the first part, kind of the research, the background. How did we come up with kind of our recommendations? So I mentioned the needs assessment. A majority of these communities that we talked to did a kind of comprehensive needs assessment to the community. And what you have here is a picture of 3 examples of needs assessments that communities did. So Issaquah and Bellevue and Lakewood, Washington. And this is just the cover page of their reports, but they did a really robust outreach and engagement program to set up their strategic plan. And so this is, in terms of human service needs assessment, what is it? And what that is a comprehensive survey of the community regarding human services. It's going to tell us what services are we doing and providing well? What are the gaps in the community where we need to be doing better? Where do we need to expand services? And then help inform future strategic planning. So you heard Lindsay talk about the comprehensive plan update and the things that the city needs to submit and work on. This will help inform upcoming strategic planning processes we have. Who would do the needs assessment? It would be performed by staff, so be performed by myself with help from others as needed. It would result in a strategic plan and report to the community. It would allow for community participation in setting funding priorities for the city. So there's always a push for more community involvement in setting how we spend our funds and how we do our budgeting. It would provide an oversight body of our community and allow subject matter experts to advise the city council and city staff on best practices for the grants. And if we do a good job, it would take probably up to 6 months to complete something like this. So, and again, the report is updated every few years. So it's just like any strategic plan, you do a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan, then you update it to see, are we meeting our goals? Do we need to adjust? Do we need to tweak our goals?
So the $300,000, does it include this staff work too, or it's
actually, the 300,000 is to go out the door to the community.
Okay.
And I'm covered in a separate.
We have a quick question.
Yeah.
So the social services organizations in the community, is it a robust list or is it lacking for the county? You know, are you finding that there are sufficient organizations to really make this effective?
Well, the City of Lacey has a long-standing relationship with lots of community-based organizations who do nonprofit work and direct service. And I think there's a robust population of nonprofits here in Thurston County and in Lacey that could participate in something like this. What we want to do is make it more transparent. So in the past, like I'm new, I just came in October, but I know that in the past, there wasn't a formalized, beginning of the grant program and then a scoring and a rubric and then an ending. It was more, you put your request in as you needed, and then if you have that relationship, you could get funded. So we're trying to create more opportunity. And I don't, Shannon, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Brown too, the idea with the needs assessment is to see where there could be gaps in the community and maybe where we do need to put some priorities for, funding resources in the future. And so that's to be determined. We haven't done the work yet, but I think that's part of the process. What Michelle's going to go through is kind of find out what is out there and, what's kind of the biggest missing pieces or gaps in funding that these nonprofits are facing so that we can make a informed decision on how we focus funding in the future.
Yeah, I was just thinking, in my mind, like the number of African-American social service organizations are few in Thurston County, and there may be some other segments that don't have a lot. And so we want to, and then oftentimes they have certain focuses, but given the information, can they expand their focus? Could they move over to qualify or get on a preferred list or something? So they would get the information pushed to them. They can qualify, apply, that type of thing. And I'm sure there are other communities that may have some of the same challenges where the organizations, the nonprofits are small, or the social services organizations are small, but they're doing great things for, a portion of the parts of the community. And we don't want to be left out, just having the big ones take all the money.
Right, and that's exactly what this program is designed to kind of
Right.
be a initial step into that world of grant funding, because when you get to the federal grants, there's a lot more rigorous requirements and a lot more administrative burden. And a lot of small groups don't have that capacity. So something introductory like this is an ability to get your foot in the door in a much less intimidating, less bureaucratic type of situation.
Great.
And I'll talk more about what kind of the outreach and engagement we're looking to do. So this is an example of Issaquah's outreach and engagement plan for their needs assessment. And you can see it took 6 months to do a good job. And they had a robust engagement process. They have actually a smaller population than the City of Lacey. They're 40,000, around 40,000-ish. But if you can look at this, I know it's kind of hard to read, but they did over 40, interviews with community-based partners. They had focus groups with older adults, with youth. They did interviews with human services agencies. They talked to their advisory boards. They did direct interviews with people who are receiving services as clients. So not just people who are at the staff level, but people that are receiving services. And they did workshops with non-English speaking residents. And obviously, talk to city departments as well. So we want to get feedback from our colleagues also. So here's what we hope to have our engagement plan, which I'll be working on in the next few months, is to do our engagement plan would include interviews with community partners and nonprofits and our faith-based organizations. We hope to do an online survey with all of the community that we don't leave open for several months. Again, there's many different ways that you heard that people can participate in engagement, and it's not always online. Sometimes it's going where people are. So doing focus groups where they are at the school district, at cultural organizations, and then again, talking to all of our advisory groups that have a vested interest. So this is my recommendation on how to execute the assessment. The assessment is phase 1 is to do the research and the engagement plan. Phase 2 is to conduct the assessment, which will happen over the summertime, which is great because there's a lot more things going on in the community when the weather's nice. Phase 3, write the draft report and present it to the work group. And then phase 4 would be to present to city council after the work group has already reviewed it and had given feedback.
So no actual grants in 2024?
We're aiming to open it up this summer. So first we have to stand up the work group, and then the work group they're gonna hit the ground running. So
okay.
we're hoping to have applications open this June.
Okay, great.
So it's a very kind of robust timeline.
Yeah, you'd be doing a lot of things at once.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Is there a way or some point that, before things are finalized, that the Equity Commission can take a look at it? Give some feedback,
Take a look at,
plan? You said
Oh,
you stand up the
absolutely.
work group and,
absolutely.
yeah.
We would love that. And we would love, you're the first advisory group that I'm talking to, because we think you're gonna be key partner all the way through.
Okay.
That we want you to be involved many different touch points because of your relationships in the community and understanding where the gaps are, like you said, and having people at the table that don't always get to the table and don't always get their voices heard. That's what we want. We're gonna include 7 members of the community, 2 members from the UGA, what's the urban growth area, a youth member, which will be a youth council member, similar to how we have liaisons to different advisory boards and the city council. We'd like to have at least 2 members with human service background. And then in your resolution, in your packet, it has all the details of how would that look and the stipend program. So the very neat thing about this is we're hoping that that stipend program is gonna be an incentive for folks to participate and to create more diversity in who gets to be on our advisory boards. So again, phase 1 is just kind of like setting up this work group, which is gonna help us kick off the program this summer. Applications are open now, again, March 25th to April 12th. Anyone can contact me, again, Michelle Chavez at cityoflacey.org. You can contact me if you have ideas or people have questions, they can contact me directly and I'll be happy to give them information. And a goal is to have our first kickoff meeting in June for the work group. What would they do? They'd meet once per month or as needed through the year. They would advise us on the application. So as we get our applications in from the community groups, they would help us make funding recommendations. And as I said, we heard from the city council that they do want to be involved in kind of viewing all the presentations for the people who are applying for grants. So we would have a joint meeting this summer in July with the advisory group and the council. They would help us with this human services needs assessment. So that means, not only taking a look at it and all the drafts that we do, but also helping us inform us on the best practices for engaging the community over the summer. They would make recommendations for long-term priorities for human services grant funding and then advise the city if there should be a permanent commission on human services or advisory on human services, or if it should remain an ad hoc group that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So again, because it is a robust timeline, we made some recommendations based on best practices from the research and development. So for the year 1, we're making recommendations before we hear from the community. This is what speaking to all these other communities in Washington and what their priorities were and how they started their first year program. So it's essential services, basic needs for people who are low income and special needs population. The city council has expressed, priority around housing. So we want to make that a priority, affordable housing, rental assistance, creating and maintaining supportive housing services, and then access to basic needs like survival needs, food, water, shelter. And then security is a little bit different in terms of more robust job training and placement services. If people needed mental, physical health care expansion, drug and alcohol recovery, and help in times of crisis and transportation. Our recommendation is to allow for both social services and capital projects for this first year. Again, our advisory group, city council may change that going forward. Capital projects capped at 50,000, and why we did that is because they tend to be more costly and they typically don't always get done in 1 year. So we hope to spread the money around to more organizations if we had a cap. And then you can apply for multiple projects, but you have to have a separate application for each project, because you can imagine how confusing it could be if you're reading applications and there's like four or five different projects or programs in that application. So I would help folks with determining, if they should have multiple applications or not. And we recommended no minimum award for the first year.
Commissioner Brown, that is kind of in alignment with the idea of, getting people to the table who might not come to tables, for other types of grant purposes.
And then we would hopefully open applications June 10th. These are all subject to change because there's unforeseen things that can happen, but this is our goal, is to provide a workshop for anyone interested in applying for the grants on June 13th, to have our recommendations in August, and again, that joint meeting in July with the council. And then we would hope to have the funding out the door by October 1st is our goal. So we want to have that robust timeline so that we can get it out to the community members. This is just a draft kind of overview. This was in your staff report, but it's a timeline and it shows our goals for the year. And then going forward, we had draft dates for 2025 and 2026. Pending we get council approval going forward for additional funds, we hope to get the money started earlier in the year. So instead of starting the program in June, we would be starting January, February. Okay, that was the end of my presentation. Questions?
A number of listening forums that we had, people said some kind of cultural center, some kind of welcoming cultural new people into town. I mean, it just, this might be an idea if a group of people got together. I mean, this might be a little seed money or something like that that we hear quite a bit about.
Downtown.
I've seen in your outreach and your communication, you have faith-based organizations up there. Are there limitations to who can apply for any of these human service grants laid out in the application process, or the criteria of who's eligible to apply, kind of thing?
Typically with government grants, you can apply for them if you're a faith-based organization, as long as what you're providing is a human service and you're not spending the government funds on like religious activities. So like Catholic Charities, for example, they often get grants from different programs, but it's for their outreach to the homeless, and it's for their soup kitchens and for their clothes closets, things like that.
I was thinking of my own church, where here's the food pantry.
Right.
That's open every Saturday, but people are coming in there getting furniture. I mean, we're collecting furniture, baby furniture, used goods, clothing. It's amazing, what people say they need in addition to food. But church turning into a human service organization.
That's very, very good comment. Yeah. And we will work with anyone who's interested before they apply, so that I'll make sure that they're eligible for what their project they're thinking of. They should just call me and run it by me to make sure that it fits within the program parameters.
It's like the capital campaign, so say the church, because of the expansion and the needs growing, they wanted to build a wing on the building just to be able to manage that kind of stuff. That's something that could be considered.
If it's human service based.
Right.
Right. So like not just a general expansion for a faith-based organization, but if it was a human service based project.
And just as a reminder too, for the purposes of the grant, we have $300,000 and we are going to have a cap this year on capital projects of $50,000.
Yeah.
And Michelle mentioned contacting her about, are you eligible? But we're also going to be holding a workshop as well. And so that would be a great time for anybody who might have an interest to show up and learn more about the grant itself.
And that will be in early June. And we hope to do that hybrid so we can have folks in person and online, because I know sometimes folks can't make it to meetings.
Question, sorry. Does it have to be the organization, they have to be located within the City of Lacey and for the City of Lacey?
Commissioner Sauer, is that for the work group or for the grant?
Grant.
So you can be located outside the City of Lacey as long as the activities that you're planning are serving Lacey residents for social services based. And then if it's a capital project, the actual physical project where the improvements are being made or the services are being done, that would need to be in the City of Lacey.
Okay, so the beneficiary recipient of that service not necessarily have to be the resident of City of Lacey, right?
Well, the goal of the program is for serving Lacey folks in the community. But if it's a nonprofit based out of Olympia, say, or outside of Olympia, the Lacey Thurston, if it's a Thurston County nonprofit who provides services in Lacey, that would be eligible. They would be
Okay,
eligible to apply.
okay, thank you.
Any questions? Feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to talk to anyone in the community that's interested in learning more.
I have a question that hit my mind as you were talking. Is this a new program?
Yes.
So nothing similar to this has existed in Lacey before now?
Yeah, so commissioners, like Michelle mentioned previously, there were nonprofit organizations that would approach the city for funding. And what we've done this year is we've just created a comprehensive and transparent and accessible process for accessing funding by nonprofit groups. So yes, it is a new program that has never been here at the city before. And Michelle's done a lot of research to help us set this up.
And that question came to me when you made the statement, something about those entities that had a relationship when they came to us, that I just saw visions of exclusion of a whole bunch of folks that didn't have relationships that could benefit from this program. So although it's not new, you're trying to put some legs and some parameters to it. So
Exactly.
I'm saying I never heard of anybody I know within the human services money from Lacey. So it's been unofficial, who you knew, who to talk to, where to go before now.
Yeah, and again, we're trying to create an open and transparent process so that there is a start, there is a, process where it gets vetted and then there is an approval. So yeah, we're really excited about this program. And like Michelle mentioned, this ad hoc group, the applications are open right now, and we are looking for members of the community who might be interested. So if you all know anybody who you think would be a great fit, we are looking, like Michelle mentioned, for 2 members who have experience with nonprofits or lived experience. And so please have them check out our website and take a look at this, and have them contact Michelle if you have questions about what the position will be.
And I think I'm right. There are other ways that the city supports social services in Lacey. I mean, the vet hub and this and that. So this isn't the only way that we give to the community, but it's just a new little more targeted or
Yes, so there's many different ways the city supports the human services community. And they also have the Community Development Block Grant, which is a whole nother program that we work with Thurston County on. And so that's a whole different discussion. We could talk for hours about that.
Just not tonight.
great.
Can I ask one question? Is that your presentation on the website? This very presentation?
Absolutely. So you can find all of the presentations from tonight if you go to the city's website, the homepage, and go to the public meetings link.
Thank you.
Going to the community liaison program. Let's see.
First try. Well, good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all again and be back. My name's Sadie Sidlin. I'm the management analyst in the city manager's office, and I am back here with you tonight to talk some more about a draft community liaison policy. So just kind of a refresher, in October and December, this commission both reviewed presentations regarding what community liaison programs are like and was given examples of how some other jurisdictions administer their programs. So I'm here tonight to talk to you kind of at a high level and get some information and feedback back from you on a draft policy that we have prepared about how this program could look about, very much modeled after the administrative features we reviewed in our meeting in December, and then hoping to hear some feedback from all of you. So there is a copy of the draft policy in your agenda packets for reference. What I have done is made a slide for each section of the policy so we can kind of review one at a time and get some feedback from all of you. So the first portion of this being kind of an overview of the program, reviewing what community liaisons are. We know they are natural relationship builders in the community who serve as messengers between the community and, in this case, the local government. So these would be individuals who the city could work with and partner with to go out in our community and get more information back. So these liaisons would be focused on creating a relationship between the community and the local government, building power in those historically underrepresented communities and reaching out to individuals who may not have the same information or historically been able to participate in city decision-making, and then constantly serving as a bridge for continuing the dialogue and creating that two-way conversation with the city while advancing equity and surfacing the ideas, concerns, and needs of the community members that we may not traditionally hear in other formats. Some of the duties that community liaisons may be tasked with would be training with city staff on different topics and on projects. As we have reviewed in the past, this could really be done on an as-need basis for whichever projects we need and would be tailored toward the needs of those projects. They could help shape and conduct a variety of outreach to underrepresented groups, spread awareness of city projects and programs and policies, really getting that information out into the community, especially to those who may not use social media or traditional news outlets to get their information, providing insights to the city to improve communications with the community. So these liaisons are really embedded with their community. They know how these communities and groups communicate and will be able to tell us as the city the best ways to approach and target groups or certain projects, helping the city understand and process the community input that we do get back, and then helping to develop a contact list to expand the network of community member contacts. So as we develop these relationships, we want to make sure we're documenting and maintaining that list so we can continue to reach out to those individuals and build off as time goes. Oh, now I've done it. The scope of work for community liaisons would really vary based on the different projects. So what we have done in this draft policy is broken out the types of work kind of by duration that these projects would potentially be. So having short-term programs that may be predominantly focused on conducting outreach and gathering input for certain targets. And then these projects are based on a predetermined hourly rate that again would vary based on the project. So some projects could have a 20-hour commitment, some could have a 40-hour commitment, but the liaisons would know ahead of time, this is your kind of limitations for this project. Then we would have the potential for long-term projects. Typically these last longer than 1 year, not always, but the same long-term liaisons would work based on a predetermined time commitment, knowing that maybe if they were working on a long-term project, it would be these set hours over the duration of a year or greater. And then the other type of work we would anticipate having liaisons used for would be emergency responses. And these could be really on a case-by-case basis where they're a natural disaster and we need to get evacuation information out to the community, we could potentially call up our liaisons and have them work on an as need basis. If something else came up that we really needed a quick turnaround and to get information out quickly, we could call liaisons in an emergency response capacity and have them work quickly on an need basis. Compensation for liaisons. We have reviewed and are looking into hiring liaisons as a contractor. Essentially, they would not be an employee of the city necessarily, but potentially a volunteer or hired as a contractor externally. And then they would be paid as determined by the city. There is a lot of room for variation based on the project type and the budget for that project, where there's room to have different options for pay and compensation. And then again, the hours also will depend. Smaller and shorter term projects will have a smaller hour base. And as I mentioned, emergency response really could be on an as-need basis. And then we obviously anticipate work on the weekends and evenings for these types of roles. One thing that we are considering also compensation wise is an increased compensation rate for emergency response. So if individuals are called to respond to an emergency, maybe giving them a percentage increase or a different rate for emergency response in addition to or higher than what a standard compensation rate would be. So at this time, we are still researching the best options for kind of that hiring process as a contractor. What are the requirements that we need and how can we do that while keeping it a low barrier program, recognizing that signing up as your own independent business may not be the easiest option for these individuals. So the city is continuing to look into options on how we can do that and also researching what the best rate of pay is. So one example, I had looked at the city of Seattle has liaisons. They pay $75 per an hour and then $100 per an hour based on emergency response. So looking at that, as we know, Seattle has a very different salary and living cost than we do in this area. So taking a comprehensive look further at what are the living expenses and costs in Lacey in the Thurston County area and what are some comparable wages that we could offer our liaisons. So that is something that we are continuing to look into at this time. This is not my friend tonight. Qualifications for community liaisons at this time, we have proposed that individuals be residents of Lacey or the Lacey UGA, or be able to prove that they are a vested community stakeholder within the community, recognizing there may be individuals who work in the city of Lacey but live outside of Lacey or the UGA, but may be really invested and embedded with Lacey communities and be a real asset as a liaison. So if they are able to display that connection, they would be considered for such a position. And then always looking for individuals who have lived experience as part of an underrepresented community and be able to serve as those relationship builders and be committed to providing feedback and delivering news to our community, and obviously having excellent communication skills, because the key here is to improve communication. Also, the ability to speak multiple languages is desired. As we know, Lacey has a very large, diverse community and not everyone speaks English as their first language. So that ability would be a great asset, but is not required. Commissioner Sauer, do you have a question?
Yeah, I can either wait until you are done or I can ask the question now.
Yeah, go ahead right now.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. Well, I would like to kind of bring it up for everyone's consideration that the qualifications, especially, make, I guess, consider like coaching these members. If you have high qualification, that makes the entry difficult for some of these community members, especially with immigrant community, English as a second language, because we're serving underrepresented community where we want to make that connection. And that, you know, you ask for excellent communication skill, obviously in English, and stuff like that. So I just wanted to bring that up, and that even offer some coaching and kind of like internship even, where they can build this communication skill as they can do their job in way that are not so much, you know what I'm trying to say? It's just that I just wanted to bring that up, because a lot of times people get trained from work, and if you just require all these experiences and excellent of everything, you're just making it very hard for people that you want to bring in.
So I think that's a really good point. We can certainly take a look at the word excellent, because that's certainly not what we were really trying to convey. It was more about being able to connect with people and hear what their perspectives are, and then to bring it back to the city. And so we can certainly take a look at that language.
Yes, and I think also recognizing communication is a lot different for a lot of different people in a lot of different groups. So although the communication skill is definitely a need that we have, what that communication looks like can be very variable. That can change depending on the group you're working with and the individuals even within that group. As we know, everybody communicates differently. I might communicate something different than Commissioner Brown would communicate it, but we can still connect and have that same dialogue and a valuable conversation. So that is also subject to who we're communicating with. And I think also Commissioner Sauer, that brings up a great point. And one thing that we have included in this draft policy is the support, stating that the city will provide necessary training, support, and guidance for these activities. So whatever the project may be, whoever may be that city staff point person who is facilitating this project is, they will be working with these liaisons, letting them know what the expectations are, what they need, and then giving them the support and empowerment to do this job confidently. They would definitely receive as much support as we could give within the capacity of this role, and always looking to seek improvement too, and hearing back, as this is going to be a new program. So I anticipate there will be some back and forth learning, and hoping that our liaisons will also communicate with us their needs and how we can make their experience better, so that it better suits everybody's needs. So the city has anticipated to provide support to our liaisons. And that again will vary on project, because certain projects may need different types of support. So
One comment I thought. The one piece, I mean, you can have someone who's highly qualified, got all the credentials and all of that stuff. But how do we verify that they are trusted in that community? You know, the person who's, you know, most qualified, got all those letters behind the name, maybe, you know, well-versed, but are they trusted in the community? Can they hold a meeting? Can they send out communications and people say, yes, I trust Jane Doe, John Doe, that the information is accurate, that this is something we should act on, this is something we should, that's important for us to know. I mean, just as you're vetting people, you know, maybe we could do like a reference check, you know, in the community.
you are all on it tonight. That is also kind of built in our application process.
So I can leave early
yes,
now?
Great,
We still got some items here.
great foresight. Kind of looking at that application process, policy-wise, we have left this up to the city to determine the best application process, recognizing that too lengthy or difficult of an application process may be a barrier to some of our applicants, right? So at this point, the minimum proposed requirements for applicants are to have submitted a letter of interest that outlines their connections to the community. Why are they interested? Who are they connected to? Where are they connected? How are they connected? And then including 2 references. So the city would be able to contact references and kind of verify and gauge based off of these letters of interest and how they're connected to make sure that they may be a good fit. And that may change, again, project-based too. There may be a very specific community that a project need connect with and may seek additional help if needed.
Well, a cliffism is, I don't trust references.
Yeah.
If I'm asked to submit 2 references, I'm gonna get 2 people that's going to really like me and be supportive and say positive things about me. So, you know, references fine, but to touch bases with key contacts in the community that you are aware of, that we have relationship with, you know, if it's this community, maybe Commissioner Sauer can help you if it's in the immigrant community. Or maybe, you know, Commissioner Jackson can help you in another community. Maybe someone else can help in the LGBTQ, you know, community, you know, other than that reference, you know. I did HR for almost 30 years. I never saw a bad reference.
And that's a great point, and that's a nice thing about having this policy written in a way that the city can determine the application processes that allows some room to change as we find needed. So maybe certain phases or the first few, the application process may look different than after we've built a strong network of, say, we get 10 really great liaisons. So we may be able to rely on the existing network on that point to help. So I anticipate that the application process could change based on the need of the project and the resources that we have. At this point, we don't have any liaisons, and we're looking hopefully to build those connection points within the community. The Commission on Equity is a really great resource for that. We have some really great embedded community members. So that is obviously always an option for the city during this application process, and recognizing that it may change, but also trying to balance that, not making the application too cumbersome that it becomes a barrier to potential applicants, right? So I think that is an excellent comment. And again, it's nice to have a little flexibility in how that process may look, and acknowledge that it could change based on the needs of the work of the liaisons.
The thing just to add on to what Sadie said, and certainly if you all, once this program, if you make a recommendation and the council approves it, so we have a couple of steps to go. But if we get a application with you all as the recommendations, we're going to be calling you too. But we hope you spread the word too about the positions if they come available. And I think another thing to keep in mind is that, you know, we'll be having some check-in points and metrics that we're going to be looking also for community liaisons to provide. And it's going to look different, like Sadie said, depending on the program or the project. But, you know, if somebody isn't a trusted community member, turns out to not be that, I think that's going to show pretty quickly in what they're able to provide back to the city. And that would be a conversation that we'd have at that point when they weren't able to provide us with actual, you know, feedback from community members.
I can see just tonight that, you know, the climate and sustainability person could use a liaison, and so.
So
could
could
we.
we. Yeah.
See the.
I have got to
Be real
hear
busy.
recently many projects that I think could be really great for a community liaison. So again, this is just presenting kind of a draft of what we are looking at policy wise, and looking to get feedback from you all on any things you may feel we could improve on, any barriers you may feel within this policy, or things that maybe we haven't considered or that would be important in seeking these liaisons.
Fun to watch it grow.
So what are the timelines on this?
I don't know that there is a specific timeline as far as when we would onboard our first liaison. Right now, we're still finalizing the policy. And as I mentioned, the city still needs to look into a couple options regarding, one, compensation. What rates are we looking to pay these liaisons? And two, what is the best onboarding process, and how do we get them onboarded with our finance department to get them paid. What qualifications do we need to require internally? So still looking into some of those things before we can propose a more finalized policy, but finding out predominantly about the policy for compensation and the financial side of things, and then finalizing a policy for review. And then hopefully sooner than later, getting some liaisons, because as we have all heard, we have some really big projects that could benefit from this.
And so, Commissioner Jackson, maybe just a little bit more detail than what Sadie provided is we're hoping to come back with a recommendation at our next meeting, which will be a joint meeting with our Lacey Youth Council. So it'll be kind of a cool moment where both boards will get to review a final policy. Like Sadie said, we're still working out a few details and we hope to have that be done by our next meeting. In which case, if we do get a recommendation from this body and the Lacey Youth Council, then we'd hope to bring it to the city council as part of a work session and then go through the approval process for that after that.
And then, my question is, hired as an independent contractor, would they have to go through some of the steps that other people would have to go through? Like if you were contracting, like when we had the people that were helping us out in the very beginning, I'm sure you went through some type of vetting process that way. What would be the difference between that type of independent contractor and then the application process that you're talking about here?
That is one of the pieces that we're looking into actually, is what qualifications or requirements do we have to have? Could we potentially hire these liaisons as a volunteer and pay them out a stipend versus having to go through a formal contracting and somebody having to own their own business to apply as a contractor? So that is one of the components that we are looking into and finalizing now to see what is the best option as a contractor to hire these individuals, so that again, it's low barrier and easier for individuals. So hoping that it doesn't have to be such a lengthy process as if we were to hire a contractor for, say, a project or a consulting. Looking more toward that volunteer capacity where we could pay in the format of a stipend so that it's easier and they have coverages as needed to participate in city activities. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
All right.
Next order of business, Shannon, advisory board stipend program.
Well, good evening, commissioners. I just wanted to, before I start with my presentation itself, I just want to again say how thankful I am and for the work that you all are doing and the work that the city is doing. And I know every meeting we have here, we talk about, things that are really about dismantling oppression and hatred in the community. So I just really, really appreciate everything that you all do on behalf of the city. With that, I'm going to talk about our advisory stipend program. This was something that was a project that came, through the Commission on Equity and then eventually all the rest of our advisory boards. And what I want to present tonight is on the data that we received from the demographic survey that we asked all of our commissioners to take to talk about, some of the gaps that we see, but also to see if the Commission on Equity sees some other things as well that we need to think about when we do future advertisements for advisory boards, which we have, one coming up here, and then, we'll potentially have some other members here shortly in the future. So the whole idea was, hey, let's use this information to change how we do our outreach and engagement. So this is setting our baseline for that moving forward. And they all do look the same from this, this business. All right, so first thing we're going to go over is the opt-in and the opt-out rate, and then what we received from the voluntary demographic data. And I do want to stress that this was voluntary. People provided what they wanted to provide. They didn't have to provide everything. So as far as opt-in and opt-out rate, so we have gone to 9 out of 10 of our advisory boards. One advisory board just hasn't met yet this year because they meet pretty infrequently, but we're hoping to actually have a meeting early next month. And so we're hoping we can get them to decide whether they want to opt in or opt out and finalize our demographic data. So total across all of our advisory boards at this moment in time, not counting Michelle's new human services work group, we have 51 people who were eligible for the program. To date, we have 48 individuals who have opted in or opted out. We did set a deadline that if we didn't hear back from you, it was presumed you were opting out at that point in time. And then we have 3 individuals who serve on that board that has not met yet, so we're hoping to get their information here shortly. So this figure shows the opt-in and opt-out rate, and you can see the majority of people so far, including the people who have not made a decision yet, opted in at 49%. And those who opted out, the rate was 45%, and we're still waiting on that remaining 6%. Keeping in mind though, like I mentioned, we do have one new 7-person advisory board forthcoming, so that could change things here pretty shortly. We also have a new youth council that will be starting early 2024. And so they'll have to go through the process again of whether they want to opt in or opt out. So if we take those 2 boards coming on board, and then we presume maybe 1 or 2 members maybe join us a little bit later, which they would have the opportunity to join. If we get 50 opt-ins this year, which again, we're sitting around 25, so it'd be almost double, we'd be expending $25,000 on this program, which we estimated when we started the program that it was going to be somewhere between $20,000 and $45,000. So we are pretty much right on target with our estimations at this point. Any questions with the opt-in or opt-out rate before I go into the demographic data? Great. So on the demographic data, very similarly, we had 51 people who were eligible to take the survey. We received 34 responses. We haven't, again, have those 3 members. They will be taking it shortly. So when you take into account the responses we had a response rate of around 71%. And just the thing to note about that is that doesn't mean that everybody answered every single question. You had the availability to answer whatever you wanted to answer and to not answer what you didn't want to answer. So the first question that was asked as part of the survey was, what is your age category? And so what this is showing right now in the dark blue is the City of Lacey's general population. So we're looking at the population of Lacey, and what the kind of tealish color is showing you is what the advisory board members of the 73% that we've got information from. And what you can see, there certainly are some missing segments from what the Census Bureau has, and I'll pull some attention here to 0 to 9. That's pretty self-explanatory. We don't have any advisory board members. That is the youth council. So our first kind of Census Bureau threshold would be that 10 to 19. And you can see based on that, the Youth Council actually did a really good job of taking this survey. And I think that is thanks to Sadie over here. She got very good participation from our Youth Council. When we're looking at other segments of the age categories, what you do notice is that there is a gap here, and it is in our 20 to 29-year-olds. Of our survey respondents, we did not receive a single 20 to 29-year-old. And so to what that indicates to us is that we need to take a look at ways that we can do a little bit more outreach and engagement to that age group specifically. Anything else that the commission sees on this that we want to talk about? And if y'all want to move up a little bit closer too, you can as well. I know the font is very small. So looking at race, the question was, what best describes racial identity? If multiracial, please select as many options as needed. And what I've done here is every time you see this teal color, that means that is what is on our advisory board. And every time you see this dark blue, that means that is the general population of the City of Lacey. And so you can see the breakdown here of our advisory board and the city population by race. What is taken out of this is ethnicity, specifically are you Hispanic or Latino? That'll be in a future slide here. Any questions or comments on this slide? And this is all too in the packets and online too, if you want to take a look at it in much greater detail and send me any feedback you have in the future. The next question was, are you Hispanic or Latino? And you can see that dark blue again is the population of the city of Lacey, which has 12.2% Hispanic or Latino. And on the advisory boards, it is just under 3%. And so certainly reviewing this seems like a definite gap as well for doing future outreach and engagement in communities to get more individuals who are identifying as Hispanic and Latino. The next question was, do you speak any languages other than English? And then the follow-up was, if you did, what other languages do you speak? What we found is that we had 7 advisory board members who did speak a language other than English. And the most popular language spoken of those members was Spanish. And there were several members who spoke a couple of languages. The next question was, do you identify as a person with a disability? Please select as many options as necessary. What you can see in this bright red color are individuals under the age of 65, and this is how the Census Bureau collects this data, and that's why we also projected it this way. If you did not have a disability or were not a person who identified as having a disability, it was the bright red color, and then individuals who do identify as having a disability in this bright green color. And so what you can see on the advisory boards is it's overrepresented from what the community is. The next question was, what's your annual estimated income? And you can see what it was through less than $10,000, which again, this is our Lacey Youth Council. So I think it's good to highlight.
I was wondering about that.
And you know, Sadie can actually tell a little bit about this, but one of the questions they had when presented this was,
was it supposed to be their personal income or the household income, right? So a point of identifying maybe room to clarify the survey in the future for individuals who may not have jobs yet. Or, you know, do we have people who the only income they have is their stipend? So maybe identifying as this household income or an individual, because all of the youth council kind of looked at this and said, well, Ms. Siglin, we don't have jobs. Exactly. So taking a look at a household level to capture all of the diversity we have within our advisory boards, recognizing that not everybody has a job. And I don't think that's exclusive to youth council always either. We may have individuals in the community who don't have jobs but participate on our boards. So identifying household, I think in the future could be a really great way to capture a more accurate depiction. But at the same token, we got a great feedback on this as well to kind of set that foundation.
yeah, so, and you know, kind of just to show what Sadie said too, in our next slide, we took it based on the census data and information we have. And what you'll see is one of the categories is, again, likely somewhat overrepresented because of the youth council. So what we did was we categorized it. You can see these are a little bit broader of categories. We have the under 50,000. So this appears to be probably much more higher when if you take out the Lacey Youth Council. And this data is based on household income, and that's why they're not quite comparables. And in the future, we want to kind of marry those questions together so we can do a direct comparison. But what you can see is certainly there's some underrepresentation in this area of income bracket, and then some overrepresentation as well as you get a little bit higher. The next question was, do you own a home? And what you can see is that when we're taking a look at our advisory board, the overwhelming majority of them did own a home. And if you again likely take out the youth council, this number would be extremely high comparative to the Lacey community. So I think as we're identifying gaps, that is another gap that we see, is that we'd like to see what more outreach and engagement we can do with rental properties here in the city of Lacey to get individuals who are renters on advisory boards moving forward. Because as you can see, the community itself is about 42% of renters comparative to 58% of homeowners. The next question was which best describes your gender identity? And there isn't a Census Bureau question that perfectly aligns with this. The Census Bureau asks for sex. And so we don't have any comparative data, but I think it does provide a snapshot of who is serving on the advisory boards. The next question was, what is your sexual orientation? And again, there is no Census Bureau question to this data point, but you can see a good representation of our advisory boards. The next question was, what is the highest level of education you completed? And you see multiple colors here, and I do want to explain all of these multiple colors. This is the advisory board across the spread. But one thing we noticed when we went to compare it to Census Bureau data is that it didn't line up again. And so I want to show you where those differences are. So I've highlighted the doctorate degree and the master's degree. The way that this is actually captured on the census form is postgraduate degree. There's not really a distinction between the two. So for the next slide, we will combine them for comparison purposes. I know they're not the same degree, but certainly that's how the data is tracked. And then the other one that I highlighted was this light blue color, which it says some high school. One of the things we found out when we were reviewing the data is we did not have an option for high school graduate or GED equivalent. And so we don't know where those individuals might have identified. Did they identify as some high school or other? So in the future, we want to clean that up and make sure that we have better data points to compare to the Census Bureau.
Let's somehow take the youth out of the youth council out of that too.
I don't know that you can.
Because other than the youth council, there may be people who only have some high school, and that's, you know, where we want them to.
Yeah, I think we certainly, adults for other advisory boards too, that we'd be looking to become more representative of our community across the board. What this is showing you is the comparison to the census data points that we do have. So you can see here, the way they describe it is high school or no degree, and we have some high school. So we do need to kind of distinguish what that actually is in the future. But the thing that you can see from this graph is that there seems to be a pretty good overrepresentation of postgraduates comparative to the community. So that is again your master's degrees and your doctoral degrees. In addition to kind of a slight overrepresentation of your bachelor's degree as well. So when we're looking at the body as a whole, advisory boards tend to have higher degrees of education than the general population.
Well, and then you're looking at the trade school, vocational, and some college could also kind of, I mean, it's not that it's that big of a difference if you added the trade school to the some college, but yeah.
So the next question was on veteran status. And again, you got your advisory board here, and it was actually fairly representative of the community as a whole, which has 15% veterans and about 85% of non-veterans. So that is a overview of the demographic data. And again, we saw some gaps, and certainly I think as we think about in the future of how we advertise and do outreach, this really shows that we need to do some targeted outreach moving forward.
It's really helpful.
Any other questions? So our plan is to take this to the city council here in the next month or so and just provide them with an update as well. They wanted an update on the advisory board stipend program. And so we'll be giving a very similar presentation to them.
As well as the youth council.
As well as the youth
They
council.
have requested a review of this data too, so.
Yeah.
They must know that they're that outlying number on some of these questions.
They're also very interested in data in general, which is pretty refreshing and fantastic.
Okay, next one, draft. Strategic plan, Shannon.
So very similarly to the last presentation, we're going to go over some slides and some information, and all of this is anticipation of including this data as an appendix in the draft diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan. So looking for some comments and feedback as we put that together. just to give you kind of a general overview, we're spending a few additional weeks than what we had initially planned, doing kind of the review in-house, but we do hope to come back to this group with final draft comments from the city by the next meeting, which is actually kind of a unique opportunity again to allow you and the youth council to take a look at it and provide any kind of final additions and commentary before moving forward with the draft plan. So this is one of the kind of final pieces we wanted to do in addition to the feedback on the strategies, goals, and baselines. So what I'm about to run over with y'all really quickly is what our workforce looks like here currently in 2024. And please don't hesitate to stop and ask questions here. So we'll take a look at how it aligns with the draft diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategic plan. And then we're going to take a look at two data groups, and one is application data. And then the second one is the city's current workforce data. So how this aligns, this is in our draft goal area of workforce and work environment in the sub area of hiring and retention, and particularly the strategy of continue to enhance recruitment efforts to attract, hire, and retain a talented workforce that reflects the greater community. And there were several benchmarks that we went through previously that were kind of supportive of this strategy. And that was staff demographics increasingly matches community demographics, percentage of total applications received from applicants increasingly matches community demographics, and then staff retention over select intervals of time matches community demographics. And we talked about taking a look at all three of those benchmarks, taking a look at race, ethnicity, and sex. We also had age up there previously in the draft, and one of the things we heard from feedback was, well, that doesn't necessarily always make sense, again, given our population has, people who are under 19, and so we don't include that information right now, and it'll be something that we come back to the commission to talk about as one of the updates we'd like to see with the draft plan. So applicant data. So a couple of things, very much like our demographic survey, I think the key point of this is that applicant data is voluntary. So if you go onto the city's website and you go to our jobs and you select a job and you fill out the information, it's going to ask you at the very end for voluntary demographic information, as well as some supplemental questions, which may not be, are not, maybe a better way to say it, voluntary. You would have to respond to those. So we're going to be looking at what was voluntarily provided to the city. We're also looking at all applicants. So at this time, we can't really break it down between full-time, part-time, and seasonal. So the information we're going to go about is everybody who turned in an application in 2023. Of all of those individuals who did this, about 83% provided some demographic data. Some people provided answers to every questions, and then others, provided answers to just a couple of questions. Of the entire application body, we did not receive 17% of demographic data from those individuals. So all of that is to say is that when we're looking at this, there are likely a lot of underrepresented and potentially overrepresented groups as well, because we just don't have data on 17% of the people who filled out applications. Other thing, just as a distinction, and we'll kind of go over this a couple of times, is that there's differences in how the city collects data and how the US Census Bureau collects data. So sometimes comparing them can be problematic. And we currently at the city use a third-party system called NeoGov to collect our applications. And that's where they provide their data for demographic surveys. And currently within NeoGov, it collects data on ethnicity, which includes our Census Bureau categories of race and ethnicity. So they are combined into one category called ethnicity. NeoGov also collects data on gender, which is a much better alignment with the Census Bureau's data on sex. So for comparison purposes for city data, when we're looking at race and ethnicity, just know that there's going to be some slight differences when we're taking a look at totals. Some things are not going to add up to 100%, and some things are going to be underrepresented because, as an example, a person could identify as white, Hispanic, or Latino, but it's not going to show up in some of our data because they could only select one category when they were voluntarily picking their information. And then we're going to be looking into solutions to this in the future. Hopefully we can find a way, whether it's through NeoGov or some other way to do this, but to break down, you know, again, into different types of classifications, whether it's full-time, part-time, seasonal, and then also to see if we can't refine the questions that we ask to make sure that we can get data that is comparative to some degree with the Census Bureau moving forward.
There's probably other cities that are looking at this NeoGov the same way, so.
Absolutely, yeah. So just again, for clarification and distinction on race and ethnicity, excuse me. We've all agreed as part of the draft Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Strategic and Belonging Plan that we were going to go by the Washington State OFM DEI glossary. And so they have the following definitions for ethnicity, with it being a social construct that divides people into smaller social groups based on characteristics such as values, behavioral patterns, language, political and economic interests, history, and ancestral geographical base. Whereas race is a social construct that divides people into smaller groups based on characteristics, most typically skin color. So what you're seeing right here is the figure A here is the race for the City of Lacey population in 2023. So this is across the entire city. And then what you're seeing here in figure B is race City of Lacey applicants for 2023. And this is again based on the data that we had available. So there are, again, still 25% or so of missing data from this particular picture. This is one way that we're looking at it. The next way is a comparison of the two. And so you can see here in figure C, what we have here in that dark blue, again, is the population of the City of Lacey. And then in this teal is the City of Lacey applicants. And you can see where there's underrepresentation across the board and where in some cases there might be overrepresentation. Again, we're limited though by the data because it was all voluntarily provided and we are missing significant amounts of applicant information. So that was for specifically for the people who turned in applications. So that was everybody, regardless of where they made it through in the process. What we're now going to look at is who was actually hired in the process itself. So very similarly, we have figure D here, which is showing you the city population in 2023. And then figure E is showing you the City of Lacey applicants that were hired. And for comparison purposes, we did the same thing where we took a look at the population, the applicants hired, and then what the difference was. So where there could be some underrepresentation and then also some potential overrepresentation. But again, our data is not complete. And so some things might be over and underrepresented. For definitions, I did want to talk a little bit about the difference between gender and sex, just to kind of clarify. So the US Census Bureau attempts to collect data on sex and not gender, but they even acknowledge that it's very confusing and that a lot of people don't really know how to correctly answer this question. So I think just for distinction, the meaning of the two concepts are not the same. Sex is based on the biological attributes of men and women, so chromosomes, anatomy, hormones, while gender is a social construction whereby a society or culture assigns a certain tendencies or behaviors to labels of masculine or feminine or a multitude of things in between. But like I said, the census says, hey, everybody has a tough time answering this question. And so we currently ask again on our system for gender, but it would be better if we asked in all likelihood for either sex or clarified on gender a little bit more. But for the purposes of this comparison, we used our agenda data and compared it against the data that the Census Bureau collects on sex. So what you can see here up on the top is the City of Lacey applicants. And this bluish color are those who identified as male. And this grayish color are those that identified as female. And then we have a few here that's not answered or other. And this is what the total population of the City of Lacey looks like here in 2023. So what you can see is that there is a, pretty significant overrepresentation of those who identified as male for applicants, total applicants at the city.
Surprise.
Again, just showed another comparison, another way to take a look at this, but it shows you the difference between the two. And it shows you, again, where there's an overrepresentation and underrepresentation. So these were all applicants, and now we're going to take a look at our city workforce data. Any questions though before we go into city workforce data? That was our applicants. Okay. So a couple of assumptions when we look at this city workforce data. Number one, unlike our previous applicant data, we can get a little bit more nuanced with our data. So what we're going to take a look at specifically here is all of our regular full-time employees. So we're not looking at part-time and we're not looking at seasonal for the purposes of this presentation. We've also had to categorize some of our positions into management or non-management categories. So when we say supervisor and management, we mean the executive team, upper management team, or a supervisor. And when we say non-supervisor, that means a non-supervisor. With race, we tried to consolidate it again to align a little bit better with what the Census Bureau has. Looking through the data, there were a couple of categories that weren't in exact alignment with the Census Bureau. So to the best degree possible, we've tried to make that alignment. And then on the note of identities, I think one thing to note is that some of this data, it's collected when you first enter into the city, and we have individuals who have been here for 0 years. We have people who have been here for 3 years. We have
Extra year there, thank you.
people who have been here for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 plus years. And all of this information was taken in when they first joined the city. So identities could change over time. And so again, we're trying to evaluate how we might get a better understanding of what our workforce looks like. But so keep in mind, some of this data might be a little bit old. And then in addition, whenever you get data, sometimes you just find some weird inconsistencies. And so there were a few little outliers. And so you'll see there is a 0 somewhere, and I'll point it out, but basically this line of data just had no information. So, so kind of similarly to what I just described, we also use a third-party system for housing this data. It's a different third-party system than our previous third-party system. It's called Naviline, and it also doesn't perfectly align with the Census Bureau. In particular, it includes Hispanic and Latino under race, again, where the census tracks it under ethnicity. And this could, again, lead to an over or underrepresentation of some individuals. And I gave you the example of white and identified as Hispanic or Latino. It could be Black and identifies as Hispanic and Latino as well. And then also, we'll take a look at gender and sex again. And very much like our first slide, we are looking at ways to improve this in the future so that we can have better comparisons here moving forward. So what this is showing you here is full-time workforce in 2024 by race and ethnicity. And we have our City of Lacey, just total population across the board, and then our current full-time city workforce down here. This is showing you, again, the same thing, but it's just giving you a comparison so you can see where there is some overrepresentation and underrepresentation between city workforce and the City of Lacey's population. We broke this down into non-management, non-supervisor, and then the City of Lacey's population. So you can see again, the City of Lacey's population, and everybody in this category is non-supervisor. Similarly, we showed kind of the difference between the two categories. And all of this information, again, is available in your packet, so you can go through it. We took a look at the supervisors and management comparative to the city's population. And we compared it again very similarly. We also took a look at the full-time workforce by race and ethnicity and age. And one of the things that we saw when we took a look at this is that the younger you are, the younger the age category, the more diverse the age category was in race. So you can see kind of each 10-year step, it becomes increasingly less diverse. And just to point this out, this is where that 0 comes in. It's that random one that has no information, and so it doesn't get categorized. We also took a look at the full-time workforce by race and ethnicity, and then the duration with the city. So you can see these are in categories of 0 to 1 year, 2 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, 11 to 20 years, 21 to 30 years, and then over 30 years. And you can see the racial distribution, and you can see, again, when we're looking at people who have less time with the city, it is more diverse. And one thing I do want to point out though too, is just the growth in on the Census Bureau of diverse 2 or more races. This was the fastest growing Census Bureau category and race over the last 2 census. So between 2020 and 2010. We took a look at sex. So what you see again up here is the city's population and then the City of Lacey's workforce. Commissioner Sauer, I see you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If you can go back, I don't know, just real quick. So you have 11% of Native American in over 30 years. Is that right?
No, that's, oh,
0 to
yeah.
1
Over
year.
30 years, you have 11% American Indian, Alaskan Native staff.
Yeah, and we can take a look at too. I think it's important to realize that when we're looking at these different categories, it also makes a difference of how many individuals are in each age category. So when we're looking at people over 30 years, there are 9 individuals currently within the organization. So that means that 1 individual of those 9 identifies as American Indian or Alaskan Native.
Yeah.
So all of that information, and I'm sorry I covered it up, but all of that is provided in all of the previous slides too of what the breakdown is. So that's a great question, Commissioner Sauer.
Okay, thank you.
So what you can see here is that when we look at the City of Lacey's workforce, when we're looking at the category of female, it's underrepresented comparative to the total population. This is another way that shows that same information. You can see what the underrepresentation is. We broke that down again into the non-supervisor, non-management categories, and you can see when we're looking at the difference, it is slightly increased what the gap is in the disparity. When we look at our supervisor and management team, you can see again that gap in disparity grows. Did the same thing where we took a look at the age, and we found that younger age categories tended to have more people who identified as female in them comparative to some of our older age categories. And then we did the same thing with duration with the city. And what we found is that, again, people with less time here at the city tended to have more females within that category. So that is a quick overview of all that demographic data. And the purpose of sharing this is, again, just to establish what that baseline is for those particular items. And so what we plan on doing is doing a write-up of all of this information, including these graphs as part of an appendix in the draft diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging strategic plan. So that way in the future, on an annual basis, we can pull very similar data and hopefully better data moving forward so that we can show if the needle is moving, if there's other things that we need to take a look at doing as far as, barriers to potential participation and outreach and engagement, et cetera.
I have a question about job, the actual jobs. I mean, I am a carpenter. They've always called us non-traditional workers, and I wonder how that is breaking down with the maintenance people, admin people, technical, if that male, female balance is, is skewed still.
I think that's a very good question.
And how about where people live? Like, do you guys have individuals that don't live in Thurston County that work here? And
You're
could
sitting
that
next to
be-
one.
Yeah, and could that be where those numbers with the city kind of askew? Cause you got tons of people that live up in Seattle that work down here at the Capitol, so we hate taking that into account as well.
Yeah, no, as part of this process, we didn't necessarily add that attribute as something that we looked at. When we look at the benchmark, the idea is, hey, we want to become more reflective of the community that we're serving. So we didn't necessarily take a look at that for this. That is an interesting point.
But then also recognizing, if I may, people move.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if we take this historical data from when they applied, somebody who lived in Lacey, maybe they moved out of Lacey, or vice versa. Maybe everyone was like, Lacey's so great, let's move where we work. So that could also reflect a pretty substantial inconsistency at the same time.
Yes.
And hopefully that data is a little bit more up to date.
Yes, well, yes.
But yes, it's a good point.
That's great. That's really what we wanna be
Yeah,
seeing and
yeah, the
looking at.
demographics, have been missing from us, as we talked about, trying to identify where the inequities existed as far as trying to make some goal statements and some strategic action steps to take to remedy where some inequities appear to exist, but without the demographic data, such a statement was not possible. You can't just speculate on what you think is going on, but the data actually informs. So that where we have the four goals, the four pillars in our strategic plan, one being workforce or something. Now we can point towards a narrative statement about what in that workforce area, where we have some inequities that we're trying to approach. There's some of the strategy about more outreach or more whatever. But now here's the framework for that narrative statement that needs to be made. Just that one, workforce analysis. Then we had community, we had education, but this helps get at that. And if there are no inequities, let's not be speculating on some goals and some activities where the only thing we can say is, let's keep doing what we're doing because we're getting the results we want. So this is great. This is great. And we're what, 2.5 years into our work as a commission? And so that had been a missing piece. And I know the work that went into developing this report, but I think the purposes it will serve will be, insurmountable as far as the information that's garnered here going forward. We're talking about another 10 years of rapid growth, more diversity. And so how do we make sure that there's equity and inclusion of who make up the community? And so this baseline, I think, when we look back 5 years from now, here's where we were in 2024, here's where we are now. That'll be great. So thanks for the effort. I know I've been kind of poking at that and been kind of so thanks for all that's behind the scenes. But now it's coming to the forefront and we can see, this is what Lacey looks like. Here are the groups, here's the makeup. Here's what the workforce look like, here's who's in the education system, who's succeeding, who's not. We'll eventually get to that. Who's dropping out, who's graduating, who's going on to college, who's completing college. And come back to where are the inequities and how do we move forward as a community together so that we have an inclusive community where everybody has an opportunity and a chance to thrive versus, we don't know. And it's a big job. So this is a large step forward in that information picture that had been missing. So I thank you all for being receptive to the questions, being receptive to whatever. And that's the only Lacey and any other city can move forward to know what is when we can dream about what we want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and be accurate in what isn't, other than speculating. So this is very helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
And commissioners, our plan now too is to pull this data every January so that we can, to that point, take a look at it over time.
Changes. Yeah.
That's it for me, Chair.
Oh, great. Commissioners' reports. Anybody have anything to share?
Well, we met for the All Abilities meeting finally. What was that, last Wednesday? Online, and it was me and, oh gosh, what's her name? Christine, Commissioner Solwood. So we made a pretty good step forward. I think it's gonna be a really good one with a lot of resources. We're gonna meet again, I believe, next week, on the, was it the second or third I saw in the email? At 4 o'clock. So if anybody's interested in joining and giving us some more perspective, introspective of how things should look. We are looking at a date of April 25th or May 5th at the Senior Center as a date for the forum. That's one of the locations that we're taking a look at. So more to come.
And I can confirm the next meeting is on the 3rd at 4 p.m.
Yes.
So yeah, if you'd like to join, you know, we can have one more commissioner join us, or else we would have to notice it as a public meeting.
I think we're good.
What did you say? What was that last part?
Yeah. So we have 2 commissioners right now working on it. So we have Commissioner Hart, Commissioner Stolberg.
Yeah.
And so we can have one more commissioner join.
Oh,
But
I
if we
see.
have
Without.
2 join, we get a quorum, and then we need to make it a public meeting.
Yeah. I think we're good to go.
I had a couple things. I wanted to shout out to the economic development, Lacey Economic Development Award. Got award for the food truck at the depot for the Washington State Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion award. So they were recognized. March 31st is Transgender Day of Visibility, and the council had a proclamation of that, which was moving. We have the League of Women Voters on the April 18th is having another forum like the one we had last year.
April 18th?
18th,
Is it the same location?
It's gonna be at the atrium.
Okay.
Which is the Thurston County building.
Thurston County Boardroom meeting, yep, room.
Is that the same one? Is it the 12th?
I was wrong.
That's better.
And I read about an equity symposium at Evergreen, April 17th and 18th. You can go online and look at it. They have a keynote speaker on the 18th that looks pretty interesting, social justice activist and scholar. So kind of the same, it's the same night that this is. The League of Women Voters is, but lots happening and shaking in town.
Yeah, can we just talk about the cultural celebration? Yeah, you know, we all worked there and all, and it was busy. I was amazed. It was, this was my 3rd year, and this one, gosh, it was work. There were a lot of people that came through and participated and had lots of questions and discussions, and we got feedback, you know, some stickers. So I thought it was a really, you know, well done event, you know, but and some new and different vendors that were there that I think just added to it and all. So it was just a real good event.
Many people I talked to, weren't from Lacey. They were coming from, they were like, oh, this big thing is happening. I'm bringing my kids from Centralia, from Gig Harbor. I mean, a lot of different things. Yeah, I wanted to ask if we get a little, did you collect the sticky notes?
We did collect it and we can bring it back at the next meeting and review it with you and the Lacey Youth
Yeah,
Council. what we
because
heard.
there was some good, I thought that was a really good way. The kids would be spinning the wheel and getting candy and the parents are like,
Well, there was also people from Seattle too. I remember a gentleman that I met, it was a little later in the day, so it wasn't as popping as it was earlier, but met a gentleman from Seattle who was very interested in our board down here and talking with you. And I think he was on a group up north and just had so many questions about what we were doing down here. So, yeah.
And a student, you talked to us, yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also thought it would be helpful to have some sort of a flyer or some, handout for those who are interested. Because we were collecting their emails in a piece of papers. So if we can just like hand something for them to take, and that would be helpful too.
I would just report briefly, I had mentioned, the end of January about what was being planned for the month of February and Black History Month. And the Black History Pop-Up Museum, just very briefly looking at the hour. The New Life Baptist Church did this pop-up Black History Museum, and for Saturdays, we opened it to the public. And more than 400 people from the public came through that museum that were not congregational members of the church. And we collected comments, evaluations, and people were just blown away with learning so much that they never knew, never heard about. And we also opened it 2 days during the week as an educational field trip for middle school and high school students. And again, with no ethnic curriculum in the schools, the kids were just blown away. Why don't we learn this in school? Why am I, So our objective and goal for reaching out to the community in an effort to help educate and inform was tremendously successful. Took a lot of volunteers to make it happen, but it happened. Thank you, Annie. You showed up. Thank you so much for coming through. So I just want to report back in that big capsule kind of way that that was just an effort going on in the community where we've got so much diversity, so many newcomers, a lot of out-of-town people that came through. Why isn't this permanent? It was 1 to 4 on Saturday afternoon. So it was experimental. And so it worked.
So comprehensive.
It worked. So I just reporting back that did take place and how successful it was and how proud we were to do it for the community.
Yeah, and I just want to share along those lines, being on the Juneteenth planning committee, and Mr. Dixon is here. But we've invited New Life to have a mini booth tent that displays some items from that they find appropriate. On Juneteenth, be a booth.
Right.
That
You
shares
display what?
some Black history.
Okay, that's what I
stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever you seem to be, find to be appropriate.
Yeah.
But that will also help to educate the community even more.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Okay, Shannon, director's report.
I only have one item, and it's an item that I am incredibly excited about for the city of Lacey. And that is that we are currently recruiting for an equity and inclusion program manager. And so please spread the word far and wide, but just really quickly to show you where it is on the website. If you go to our city's website, and this is where you can find all of our jobs. You can select jobs right here on the city's website. And when you select jobs, it'll take you to where all of our current openings are, and then also just our job descriptions. So if you select current jobs, these are the ones that you can apply for right now. And you can scroll down and you can find that right now we are hiring for a lot of our summer staff. So also if you know of anybody, please pass on that word. But we have our equity and inclusion program manager. And you can click on this and you can learn about the purpose of this very important staff and what they're going to be doing here on behalf of the city. And so we're incredibly excited to have it and hoping for a really great candidate pool so we can have an incredible person here take this position. So please feel free to share it if you know of anybody who may be interested.
And it's open until when?
Oh, I just closed it. But I think it's early April. It is April 8th.
Oh, God.
Sure, that is all the reports I have.
Okay, well, that might be the end. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait, we've gotta find out first who's gonna do the next inspirational minutes next month.
Chair, I volunteer.
Oh,
Commissioner Jackson.
right, I forgot.
So I move that.
And Chair Clay, I would just say we don't need any motions to adjourn. You can just
we don't.
adjourn the meeting.
Oh, well, I have some power here.
But you know, if Commissioner Brown really wants to.
It's not my bedtime yet. I may wanna talk.
Well, during the meeting at 8:14.
All right.
But we would have been on time had we not had all that.